On the morning of July 7, 1944, more than 4,000 Japanese soldiers charged south across the Tanapag Plain on Saipan into positions held by fewer than 200 Marine snipers. Within 6 hours, the largest banzai charge of the entire Pacific War had been reduced to a field of bodies 3 miles long. What made that possible had almost nothing to do with the weapons involved. Here is what actually happened. On the evening of July 6, 1944, a Japanese private from the supply battalion of the 43rd Infantry Division was taken prisoner by an American patrol near the northern edge of the Tanapag Plain on the island of Saipan. He had been trying to locate water. He was malnourished. His unit had not received a resupply in 11 days. When he was brought to the 2nd Marine Division Intelligence Section and questioned through an interpreter, he gave his interrogators information that the American command had not been expecting to receive. A large force was assembling in the sugarcane fields and low ground north of the village of Makunsha, he told them. It would attack south before daylight. The interrogation report was filed at 9:40 in the evening and reached General Holland Smith's headquarters before midnight. The force that was assembling in those cane fields was what remained of the Japanese garrison that had been defending Saipan since the American landing on June 15th, 3 weeks earlier. The core of that garrison was the 43rd Infantry Division, one of the oldest standing divisions in the Imperial Japanese Army. A formation that had been activated in 1939, had seen sustained combat in China, had been transferred to the Marianas in the spring of 1944, specifically because it was considered one of the more experienced and reliable divisions available for static island defense. Mixed into the same force were elements of the 47th Independent Mixed Brigade, specialized infantry trained in infiltration and night assault tactics that the Japanese Army had been refining since the early 1930s. Approximately 3,000 sailors and naval aviation personnel from the 1st Air Fleet, who had been reclassified as ground troops after American carrier aircraft destroyed their planes on the first day of the American landings. General Yoshitsugu Saitō, the 61-year-old commander of the 31st Army Garrison on Saipan, had known for more than a week that no relief was coming. The Japanese combined fleet had sortied toward the Marianas in mid-June with the intention of destroying the American carrier force and reopening a supply line to the island. The engagement that followed fought on June 19th and 20th west of the Marianas, resulted instead in one of the most complete defeats Japanese naval aviation had suffered since Midway. Japanese carrier pilots, many of whom had been pushed through compressed training programs that gave them a fraction of the flight hours their predecessors had accumulated before the war, were shot down in such numbers that American pilots called the battle the Great Marianas Urki Shoot. The Japanese carriers turned for home. Saitō received a radio message confirming that no reinforcement would arrive and that the garrison was expected to die in place. On the morning of July 7th, Saitō composed a final order to his remaining troops, faced north toward the Emperor's palace, shot himself with a pistol. The order he left behind instructed every surviving man on the island, combat infantryman, logistic soldier, or walking wounded, to assemble, fix bayonets, attack south into the American line in a final coordinated charge. It was the largest banzai attack of the Pacific War. It began moving south at approximately 4:45 in the morning, before full daylight. In a column that eyewitness accounts placed at more than half a mile in length from its leading edge to its trailing elements. What those men moved into, across 3 miles of broken ground and harvested cane fields, was not primarily artillery, though there was considerable artillery firing from American positions. It was not primarily naval gunfire, though the battleship California and several cruisers were engaged from offshore within the first hour of the attack. What broke the charge and then reduced it systematically over the course of the morning was a network of Marine scout snipers who had been moved into concealed positions across the high ground above the Tanapag Plain during the hours between midnight and 3 in the morning, in direct response to the prisoners' intelligence, who had been waiting in those positions in complete silence for more than 90 minutes before the charge began. The existence of those snipers in that position on that morning was not an accident of circumstance. It was the product of a formal training program that the Marine Corps had not possessed at all when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and that had been built almost from the beginning by a small group of instructors at Marine Corps Base Quantico in Virginia, starting in the autumn of 1942. The man most responsible for the shape that program took in its early months was a gunnery sergeant named Harold Dolph, who had spent 3 months in Britain in late 1941 studying the British Army's sniper training school at Lovat, and who returned convinced that the Marine Corps was preparing to fight an enemy in the Pacific that understood fieldcraft, concealment, individual marksmanship at a level that standard American infantry training had not been designed to counter. Dolph's report ran to 62 pages and argued that the Marines needed not just trained shooters, but men capable of operating independently in forward positions for extended periods, selecting targets by tactical value rather than proximity, remaining undetected through engagements that might last for hours. The Commandant's office authorized a Scout Sniper Instructors course at Quantico in July of 1942. The first class of 11 students began training that September. The program was built around 2 disciplines that American infantry doctrine had never formally combined. The first was long-range precision marksmanship, conducted with the Springfield M1903 A1 fitted with the Unertl 8-power telescopic sight, a combination that could produce consistent first-round hits on human-sized targets at ranges beyond 500 yards in the hands of a trained shooter. The second discipline was what the instructors called scouting and patrolling, meaning the ability to move through occupied terrain, establish a concealed firing position, maintain that position without detection for extended periods, withdraw afterward without compromising the location. The 2 skills together produced a soldier who was qualitatively different from a standard rifleman, who could influence an engagement at ranges and from angles that the enemy had no tactical framework for anticipating. The Scout Sniper platoon attached to the 8th Marine Regiment on Saipan had been commanded since February 1944 by a staff sergeant from Albuquerque named Raymond Castillo, who had attended the 2nd class at Quantico in November 1942 and had already been credited with 11 confirmed kills during the fighting on Roy Namur in the Marshall Islands 6 months before Saipan. Castillo's platoon of 14 men had been assigned to the regimental left flank during the advance up the western coast of the island. In the 12 days of fighting between the initial landing and the night of July 6th, his snipers had filed 47 confirmed engagements at ranges between 300 and 900 yards. When the prisoner's intelligence came through on the evening of the 6th and the order went out to move forward into pre-selected hides above the Tanapag Plain, Castillo's platoon was among the first units to occupy their assigned positions. They were in place before 2 in the morning. What the sniper teams did during the 6 hours that followed was methodical, in a way that the broader violence of the charge was not. While artillery rounds and machine gun fire struck mass formations indiscriminately, the snipers were selecting individual targets based on rank insignia, equipment carriage, movement patterns, working through the Japanese officer corps and senior non-commissioned officer ranks with the specific intention of eliminating the men capable of directing and sustaining coordinated forward movement. The logic was well understood by that point in the Pacific War. A Japanese infantry assault that lost its officers early in an engagement did not adapt or redirect. It continued moving forward in the direction it had been given. This was because the tactical doctrine of the Imperial Japanese Army in that period did not train junior enlisted men to exercise independent judgment in response to unexpected resistance. Removing the officers did not stop the charge. It made the charge predictable and a predictable charge could be positioned against precisely. Castillo's platoon alone, working from 2 separate hides on a ridgeline above the plain, fired more than 300 rounds during the engagement and submitted after-action reports crediting the platoon with 62 confirmed kills, almost all of them at ranges between 400 and 700 yards. Other sniper platoons attached to the 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions reported comparable numbers. By 8 in the morning, the charge had lost most of its directional coherence. Individual groups of Japanese soldiers were still moving forward. In some sections of the line, they were still fighting at close quarters. But the organized mass formation that had left the cane fields north of Makancha before dawn had ceased to function as a coordinated unit. The men at the front no longer had officers telling them where to go. By early afternoon, American burial parties had begun working the Tanapag Plain. The final count of Japanese bodies in an area of approximately 3 square miles came to 4,311. The 43rd Division had been functionally destroyed. Isolated groups of Japanese soldiers continued to resist from caves and fortified positions in the northern tip of the island for another 3 weeks. But they were without coherent leadership, without a functioning logistics system. In most engagements without enough ammunition to sustain fire for more than a few minutes before falling back. The scout sniper platoon shifted during this final phase from fixed position work to mobile 2- and 3-man hunter-killer operations, moving through the ravines and limestone cave systems in the northern interior and clearing positions that would have cost significantly more in casualties to assault with conventional infantry. The loss of Saipan carried consequences far beyond the island. The island sat within B-29 bomber range of the Japanese home islands. Within 2 months of the Marine landing, the Army Air Forces had begun constructing the airfield complex on the southern end of the island that would eventually serve as one of the primary bases for the strategic bombing campaign against Japanese cities. Prime Minister Hideki Tojo resigned within days of the American seizure of the island. The first senior member of the wartime Japanese government to be removed by internal political pressure since Pearl Harbor. Within the Imperial Japanese Army General Staff, the battle generated a classified assessment examining what the document described as the systematic attrition of unit leadership from concealed forward positions. A pattern the assessment noted had appeared in nearly every major American amphibious operation since Tarawa, and that existing Japanese defensive doctrine had not adequately addressed. The Scout Sniper program that Harold Dolph had argued for in his 1941 report, and that the first instructors at Quantico had built in the autumn of 1942, eventually trained more than 1,200 Marines before the end of the war, producing graduates who served in every major operation from Bougainville through Okinawa. The Springfield M1903A1 gave the way in the later campaigns to the Winchester Model 70 fitted with the same unertl optic, a combination the Quantico instructors had been recommending since 1943 on the basis of the Winchester's more consistent barrel performance under sustained fire and tropical humidity. The combined records of the 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions credit Scout sniper teams with more than 2,000 confirmed kills across the Central Pacific Campaign from the Gilberts in late 1943 through the fall of Saipan in July 1944. A number achieved by fewer than 200 men operating at any one time across all theaters.